You're watching a documentary about animal behavior, and the narrator mentions that elephants can communicate over distances of 6 miles. 6 miles. You pause for a moment, trying to imagine what that would be like. To send a message to someone on the other side of town without technology, without phones, just using your voice. Except elephants aren't using sound the way we think of it. They're using frequencies so low that human ears can't detect them at all. We're surrounded by conversations we can't hear, messages written in chemicals we can't smell, and light shows in spectrums we can't see. Welcome back to Midnight Deep Dive. If you're new here, welcome to this cozy corner of the internet where we explore the fascinating stories of our natural world. Tonight, we're venturing into the hidden languages of animals, the remarkable and sometimes bizarre ways that creatures communicate with each other. From whales singing songs that travel across ocean basins to fireflies writing love letters in bioluminescent code, we'll discover that the natural world is far more talkative than we ever imagined. So settle in with your favorite blanket, let the world outside fade to background noise, and join me as we explore 10 strange and fascinating ways animals communicate. Our journey begins in a realm of sound that exists just beyond the edges of human perception, where giants speak in frequencies that shake the earth itself. The human ear is remarkable, capable of detecting sounds ranging from about 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. But this range represents only a thin slice of the acoustic universe. Below our hearing threshold lies infrasound, deep rumbling frequencies that can travel for miles. Above it exists ultrasound, high-pitched squeaks and chirps that we're completely deaf to. And in these invisible realms, animals are having conversations all around us. Let's start in the African savanna, where a family of elephants moves slowly through the tall grass. The matriarch stops, and something remarkable happens. She produces a sound so low that it's more felt than heard, a deep rumble that starts in her larynx and resonates through her massive body. To us, standing nearby, it might sound like a faint growl or simply a feeling of pressure in our chests. But to other elephants miles away, this is a clear message. Elephants are masters of infrasound communication. They produce calls ranging from 14 to 35 Hz, well below the 20 Hz threshold of human hearing. These low frequencies have a special property that makes them perfect for long-distance communication. While higher frequency sounds get absorbed and scattered by trees, hills, and atmospheric conditions, infrasound travels remarkably well. An elephant's call can reach other elephants up to 6 miles away under ideal conditions, and possibly even farther. The content of these infrasonic calls is surprisingly complex. Researchers have identified over 70 different types of elephant vocalizations, each with its own meaning. A matriarch might send out a "let's go" rumble to coordinate her family's movement. A male in must produces distinctive calls advertising his breeding condition to females miles away. When an elephant dies, family members have been observed producing low-frequency calls that seem to serve as grief vocalizations, drawing other elephants to the body from considerable distances. The biology behind elephant infrasound is fascinating. Their vocal cords are similar to ours, but much larger, and can vibrate at these incredibly low frequencies. But here's what makes it even more remarkable. Elephants don't just produce infrasound with their voices. They also create seismic signals by vocalizing, essentially using the ground as a transmission medium. When an elephant rumbles, the sound waves travel through the air, but the elephant's body contact with the ground also creates vibrations that travel through the earth. Other elephants can detect these seismic signals through their feet, which contain specialized pressure-sensitive nerve endings. This dual-channel communication system means that an elephant's message can reach recipients through 2 different pathways, increasing the effective range and reliability of the signal. It's like sending both an email and a text message to make sure your message gets through. Whales and dolphins also use infrasound, though their medium is water rather than air. Blue whales produce calls as low as 10 Hz, among the lowest frequency sounds produced by any animal. These calls can travel across entire ocean basins. A blue whale singing off the coast of California might be heard by another blue whale near Hawaii, over 2,500 miles away. The ocean acts as a sound channel, with certain depths where sound waves travel particularly efficiently, allowing these massive animals to maintain contact across distances that would have been unimaginable before we understood their acoustic abilities. The songs of humpback whales, though they contain higher frequency components we can hear, also include infrasonic elements. These complex vocalizations can last up to 20 minutes and are repeated in cycles that can continue for hours. All the males in a population sing roughly the same song, which evolves slowly over time, with new phrases being added and old ones dropped in a process that looks remarkably like cultural transmission. Now let's flip to the other end of the acoustic spectrum and explore ultrasound, frequencies above human hearing. If you've ever walked through a park at dusk and felt like the air was somehow active, even though you couldn't hear anything, you were experiencing the ultrasonic world of bats. Bats produce echolocation calls ranging from about 20,000 Hz up to 120,000 Hz or higher. These are among the highest frequency sounds produced by any mammal. Most bat calls are completely inaudible to humans, though some species produce calls with components in our hearing range, creating those faint clicking sounds you might hear on a summer evening. But bats aren't communicating with these ultrasonic calls, at least not primarily. They're navigating and hunting. We'll explore echolocation in detail in our next chapter. For social communication, bats use a different set of vocalizations, many of which are also ultrasonic, but serve distinct purposes from their hunting calls. Mother bats and their pups communicate through ultrasonic isolation calls. When a baby bat gets separated from its mother in a cave containing thousands or even millions of bats, it produces a distinctive call. Remarkably, the mother can identify her own pup's voice from among the cacophony and locate it with precision. The frequency signatures of these isolation calls are individually distinctive, essentially functioning as vocal signatures or names. Rodents are unexpected ultrasound communicators. Mice and rats produce ultrasonic vocalizations in frequencies ranging from 30,000 to 110,000 Hz. For decades, we thought mice were mostly silent creatures, only occasionally producing audible squeaks. Then researchers developed equipment that could detect ultrasonic sounds and discovered that mice are actually quite chatty, but in a frequency range we can't hear. Male mice produce ultrasonic songs when courting females, complex vocalizations with phrase structure and patterns that show individual variation. These songs aren't random chirps but organized sequences with repeated motifs, similar in structure to bird songs. Female mice show preferences for certain song types, suggesting that these ultrasonic performances play a role in mate selection. Baby mice produce ultrasonic distress calls when separated from their mothers or when they're cold. These calls trigger immediate maternal behavior, with mothers rushing to retrieve calling pups. The frequency and structure of these calls change as the pups develop, providing information about their age and condition. Even more remarkably, mice produce different ultrasonic vocalizations depending on their emotional state. When playing, juvenile mice produce high-frequency trills. When stressed or in pain, they produce different call types. Some researchers have suggested that mice might even produce something analogous to laughter, high-frequency chirps emitted during play and in response to tickling. The question of whether this represents actual positive emotion or just a reflexive response remains debated, but it highlights how much complexity exists in animal communication that we're only beginning to understand. Dolphins and porpoises use ultrasound for both echolocation and communication. Their signature whistles, which we'll discuss more in the vocal learning chapter, can reach frequencies up to 150,000 hertz. Each dolphin develops a unique whistle early in life that serves as an individual identifier. When dolphins are separated, they call each other using these signature whistles, essentially calling each other by name. The evolution of infrasound and ultrasound communication reveals something profound about how animals adapt their signals to their environments and their needs. Large animals in open habitats benefit from infrasound because it travels far and isn't easily blocked. Small animals benefit from ultrasound partly because they can produce it more efficiently with their smaller vocal structures, but also because high-frequency sounds provide better spatial resolution for echolocation, and because predators with ears tuned to lower frequencies might not detect their ultrasonic communications. This invisible acoustic landscape surrounds us constantly. Right now, as you're listening to this, elephants might be rumbling to each other in infrasonic frequencies you can't detect. Bats might be navigating through the night sky using ultrasonic calls that paint detailed acoustic pictures of their surroundings. Mice might be singing love songs in your walls that you'll never hear. The air is full of voices, conversations, songs, and messages in frequencies that exist just beyond the edges of our perception. A reminder that our senses show us only a narrow slice of reality. Imagine being able to navigate in complete darkness, to fly through a forest at high speed without crashing, to detect a tiny insect in flight and intercept it with perfect precision, all without using your eyes. This isn't science fiction. This is echolocation, one of nature's most sophisticated communication systems, though in this case, the communication is between the animal and its environment rather than between individuals. Echolocation works on a principle that's simple to describe but extraordinary in execution. An animal produces a sound, usually a very brief click or pulse. This sound travels outward until it hits an object, then bounces back as an echo. By analyzing the timing, intensity, and frequency changes in the returning echo, the animal constructs a detailed acoustic image of its surroundings. Bats are the most famous echolocators, and their abilities border on the supernatural. A hunting bat might produce calls at rates of up to 200 clicks per second, processing the returning echoes to create an acoustic movie of the world around it. These calls are incredibly loud at their source, often over 110 decibels, which is about as loud as a rock concert. We don't experience them as deafening because most of the energy is in ultrasonic frequencies we can't hear, and because bats often aim their calls directionally rather than broadcasting in all directions. The sophistication of bat echolocation becomes clear when you consider what they can detect. Bats don't just sense whether an object is present or absent. They can determine its size, shape, texture, distance, direction of movement, and sometimes even what it's made of. A bat can distinguish between a beetle and a moth of similar size based on differences in how their wings reflect sound. Some bats can detect wires less than a millimeter thick. The acoustic world they perceive is far richer than we initially imagined. Different bat species use different echolocation strategies depending on their hunting methods and habitats. Bats that hunt in open spaces produce calls that are relatively long and low in frequency, which travel farther but provide less detailed information. Bats that hunt in cluttered forest environments produce shorter, higher frequency calls that provide detailed information about nearby objects, but don't travel as far. This is acoustic ecology, where the structure of the signal is shaped by the environment where it's used. Some bats have evolved particularly specialized echolocation abilities. Fishing bats can detect ripples on water surfaces created by fish swimming near the surface, essentially using echolocation to see through the water's surface. Frog-eating bats can distinguish between poisonous and non-poisonous frogs based on the acoustic characteristics of their mating calls. Vampire bats use echolocation combined with infrared heat sensing to locate blood vessels on their sleeping prey. The neural processing required for echolocation is staggering. A bat's brain must perform incredibly rapid calculations, comparing outgoing calls with returning echoes, compensating for the Doppler shift caused by the bat's own movement, filtering out irrelevant echoes, and constructing a coherent acoustic image, all in real time while flying at high speeds. The auditory cortex of echolocating bats is greatly enlarged compared to non-echolocating species, with specialized neural structures dedicated to processing temporal and spectral patterns in echoes. Bats also show behavioral adaptations for echolocation. Most species have a specialized muscle in their middle ear that contracts just before they produce an echolocation call, temporarily reducing their hearing sensitivity. This prevents the loud outgoing call from damaging or overwhelming their sensitive auditory system. The muscle then relaxes immediately afterward, restoring full sensitivity in time to detect the returning echo. This all happens in milliseconds. But bats aren't the only echolocators. Dolphins and toothed whales are equally sophisticated acoustic imagers, adapted for an entirely different medium. In water, sound travels about 4.5 times faster than in air, requiring different adaptations, but offering some advantages. Water is an excellent conductor of sound, allowing echolocation to work over greater distances than it does for bats in air. Dolphins produce echolocation clicks using specialized structures in their nasal passages, not their vocal cords. These clicks are incredibly brief, lasting only about 50 to 150 microseconds. They're also extremely loud, up to 220 decibels at the source, making them among the loudest biological sounds produced by any animal. The clicks are focused into a beam using the melon, a fatty organ in the dolphin's forehead that acts as an acoustic lens. When the echo returns, it's received not through the ears but through the lower jaw, which contains a thin section of bone and a fat channel that conducts sound to the inner ear. This allows dolphins to have a form of directional hearing, determining not just that something is there, but also where it is with remarkable precision. Dolphin echolocation is sensitive enough to detect a fish buried in sandy sediment on the sea floor. They can distinguish between objects made of different materials that look identical. Some experiments have shown dolphins can detect differences in metal plates of the same size and shape based on thickness variations of only a few millimeters. They're essentially using sound to perform what we would consider X-ray vision. Sperm whales produce the loudest echolocation clicks of any animal, reaching up to 230 decibels. These massive cetaceans hunt squid in the deep ocean, sometimes diving to depths of over a mile and staying submerged for more than an hour. In the pitch black of the deep sea, echolocation is their primary sense, allowing them to navigate and hunt in conditions where vision would be useless. Beyond mammals, a few bird species have also evolved forms of echolocation, though generally less sophisticated than those of bats and dolphins. Oil birds in South America and several species of swiftlets in Asia use echolocation to navigate in the dark caves where they nest. Their calls are audible to humans, sounding like clicks or rattles, and while their echolocation isn't as precise as that of bats, it's sufficient for avoiding obstacles in complete darkness. Perhaps the most surprising echolocator is a human one. Some blind individuals have learned to echolocate using tongue clicks, producing sharp clicking sounds and listening to the echoes to navigate their environment. While nowhere near as sophisticated as bat or dolphin echolocation, some practitioners have achieved remarkable abilities, including riding bicycles through traffic, hiking in wilderness areas, and identifying objects by their shape and material. Brain imaging studies of these individuals show that areas of their visual cortex, normally unused due to blindness, are activated during echolocation. Their brains have repurposed visual processing areas for processing acoustic spatial information, demonstrating the remarkable plasticity of the human nervous system. The evolution of echolocation represents one of nature's most elegant solutions to the problem of perceiving the environment in conditions where vision doesn't work well. It emerged independently in bats, toothed whales, and birds, an example of convergent evolution where similar challenges produce similar solutions. Each lineage adapted the basic principle to their specific circumstances, but all rely on the same fundamental insight. Sound can be used not just to communicate, but to see. As you sit in your room right now, sound waves are bouncing off every surface, creating echoes that your brain mostly ignores. But if you were a bat or a dolphin, those echoes would paint a detailed picture of your surroundings, a world of acoustic textures and distances, of moving objects and hidden obstacles. Echolocation reminds us that reality can be perceived in ways wildly different from our own experience, and that the sensory world we inhabit is just one of many possible ways of experiencing the universe. Close your eyes and imagine you could read stories written in the air itself. A molecule lands on your antenna, and suddenly you know that a relative passed this way 3 hours ago, moving west, stressed about something, possibly injured. Another molecule tells you that food is available 200 meters to the north, specifically a ripe apple with a small bruise on the bottom. A third molecule is a warning. A predator recently walked through this area, and you should be cautious. This is the world of chemical communication, and for many animals, it's their primary language. While we humans are primarily visual creatures with relatively weak senses of smell, much of the animal kingdom lives in a universe of sense, where chemical messages convey information with a precision and complexity that rivals any vocalization. Let's start with the masters of chemical communication: insects. Ants, bees, termites, and other social insects conduct nearly all their communication through chemical signals called pheromones. A single ant colony might use 20 or more different pheromones to coordinate their activities, creating what amounts to a complex chemical language. When a worker ant discovers food, she doesn't run back to the colony shouting the news. Instead, she lays down a trail pheromone as she walks back to the nest, touching her abdomen to the ground at regular intervals and depositing tiny quantities of a chemical compound. Other ants can detect this trail and follow it to the food source. As more ants travel the trail, they reinforce it with their own pheromone deposits, creating a chemical highway that guides workers efficiently to resources. But trail pheromones are just the beginning. Ants use alarm pheromones when they're attacked or when they discover a threat. These chemicals have an immediate and dramatic effect, causing nearby ants to become agitated and aggressive, essentially summoning reinforcements to deal with the danger. Different species use different alarm pheromones, and even within a species, there might be multiple alarm signals that convey different information about the type and severity of the threat. Queen ants produce pheromones that suppress the reproductive development of workers, essentially using chemical signals to maintain the social structure of the colony. When a queen dies, the absence of these pheromones triggers behavioral and physiological changes in workers, with some developing the ability to lay eggs themselves. The queen doesn't rule through force, but through constant chemical communication that coordinates the entire colony's behavior. Honeybees use a particularly fascinating array of pheromones. The queen produces queen mandibular pheromone, a complex blend of several compounds that affects worker behavior in multiple ways. It attracts workers to her, inhibits the development of their ovaries, and prevents them from raising new queens. When a beekeeper adds a new queen to a hive, the workers won't immediately accept her. They need time to become accustomed to her unique pheromone signature, essentially learning to recognize her chemical identity. Worker bees produce Nasanov pheromone from glands on their abdomen, which they use as an orientation scent to help other bees find the hive entrance or locate a swarm cluster. When you see bees fanning at the hive entrance on a warm day, they're not just cooling the hive, they're also dispersing Nasanov pheromone to help foraging bees find their way home. Guard bees at the hive entrance recognize nestmates partly through colony-specific odors, chemical signatures that identify individuals as belonging to the hive. Bees from foreign colonies that try to enter are detected by their different chemical signature and are usually attacked and driven away. This chemical recognition system is so sensitive that bees can even detect subtle differences between closely related colonies. Moths take chemical communication to extraordinary distances. Female silk moths produce a sex pheromone called bomicol that male moths can detect from several miles away. The male moth's antennae are elaborately feathered structures covered with thousands of sensory cells, each capable of detecting a single molecule of bomicol. When just a few molecules land on his antenna, the male begins flying upwind, following the concentration gradient of the pheromone toward its source. This sensitivity is almost beyond comprehension. A male silk moth can detect and respond to concentrations as low as 1 molecule per cubic centimeter of air. If you converted that to human terms, it would be like smelling a single drop of perfume diffused throughout a volume the size of several large buildings. The moth doesn't just detect that the pheromone is present. He can determine which direction it's coming from and track it to its source through a complex behavior pattern of zigzag flight upwind. Mammals also communicate extensively through chemical signals, though we humans, with our reduced sense of smell, often underestimate this aspect of mammalian communication. Dogs provide a familiar example. When your dog stops to sniff a fire hydrant or tree, they're not just being annoying, they're reading a chemical message board. Other dogs have left scent marks that convey information about their identity, sex, reproductive status, health, diet, and emotional state. Dogs and other canids can even use scent marking strategically. A dominant wolf will overmark the scents of subordinate pack members, essentially asserting their social status through chemical communication. The height at which a male dog urinates carries information about the marker's size, with smaller dogs sometimes attempting to mark higher than their actual size would suggest, a form of chemical dishonesty. Cats use scent marking in multiple ways. When a cat rubs its face against your legs or furniture, it's depositing pheromones from facial glands. These facial pheromones seem to have a calming effect and mark familiar objects and individuals as safe and friendly. Cats also have scent glands between their toes, so when they scratch furniture, they're leaving both a visual mark and a scent mark, claiming the territory in multiple sensory modalities. The flamen response, that peculiar expression where cats and many other mammals curl their upper lip and appear to be grimacing, is actually a way of drawing scent molecules into the vomeronasal organ, a specialized chemosensory structure in the roof of the mouth. This allows more detailed analysis of pheromones, particularly those related to reproduction. When a male cat encounters urine from a female in heat, he performs this behavior to gather detailed information about her reproductive status. Elephants use chemical communication in ways that complement their infrasonic vocalizations. Female elephants in estrus produce a pheromone in their urine that males can detect from considerable distances. Males in musth, a periodic condition of elevated testosterone and increased aggression, secrete a distinctive substance from their temporal glands that signals their state to other elephants. This chemical signal, combined with behavioral changes and specialized vocalizations, helps prevent dangerous conflicts between males by making their status unambiguously clear. Even aquatic animals use chemical communication, though the physics of scent in water differ from those in air. Fish detect chemical signals through their highly developed olfactory systems. Salmon famously navigate back to their birth streams using chemical signatures, essentially following a scent trail through the ocean to the specific stream where they hatched years earlier. This ability is so precise that salmon can distinguish between streams only meters apart based on subtle differences in the chemical composition of the water. Sharks are legendary for their ability to detect blood in water, capable of detecting 1 part blood per million parts water. But they detect much more than just blood. Sharks use chemical cues to find food, avoid predators, locate mates, and navigate to specific locations. Some sharks appear to use chemical landmarks in the ocean, essentially navigating by smell through areas where visual landmarks are non-existent. The chemistry of pheromones is diverse and complex. Some pheromones are simple molecules, while others are intricate blends of multiple compounds where the specific ratio of ingredients conveys the message. The same chemical can convey different information depending on concentration. And some chemical messages are species-specific, while others are understood across species boundaries. What makes chemical communication particularly effective is its persistence. A sound disappears moments after it's produced. A visual signal requires a line of sight, but a chemical signal can remain in the environment for hours, days, or even longer, depending on the stability of the compound and environmental conditions. An animal can leave a message and move on, knowing that recipients will find it later. This makes chemical communication ideal for marking territories, leaving trails, and providing information that needs to be available over extended time periods. The evolution of chemical communication likely predates most other forms of communication. Even bacteria use chemical signaling through quorum sensing, releasing and detecting molecules to coordinate their behavior based on population density. From single-celled organisms to complex mammals, chemical communication represents one of life's most ancient and successful communication strategies. As you move through the world, you're leaving a chemical trail. Your skin cells, your breath, the products you use, all create a unique scent signature that dogs can easily detect and follow. You're surrounded by chemical messages that your nose is too insensitive to perceive. The air carries stories of who passed by, what they ate, how they felt, written in molecules that float invisibly around you, a library of information in a language you've mostly forgotten how to read. Picture yourself in the deep ocean where sunlight never penetrates, where the darkness is absolute and endless. And then, suddenly, a constellation of lights appears, blue-green pinpoints that pulse in complex patterns, drawing closer. This is the language of light, bioluminescence, one of nature's most magical forms of communication. Bioluminescence is the production of light by living organisms through chemical reactions. While it might seem rare from our terrestrial perspective, in the ocean, it's extraordinarily common. Some estimates suggest that up to 90% of organisms living in the deep ocean produce light in some form. The ocean at night is full of living lights, a silent conversation in luminescent code. The chemistry of bioluminescence is elegantly simple in principle, but can be quite complex in detail. At its core, bioluminescence requires 3 components: a light-emitting molecule called luciferin, an enzyme called luciferase that catalyzes the reaction, and oxygen. When these come together, luciferin is oxidized, and energy is released in the form of light. Different organisms use different types of luciferins and luciferases, which produce different colors and intensities of light. What makes bioluminescence remarkable as a communication system is its efficiency. Chemical light is cold light, unlike the hot light produced by fire or incandescent bulbs. In bioluminescent reactions, nearly 100% of the energy goes into producing light rather than heat, making it one of the most efficient light sources known. For comparison, incandescent bulbs convert only about 10% of energy into light, with the rest wasted as heat. Fireflies are probably the most familiar bioluminescent organisms to most people, and they use their light-producing abilities primarily for communication, specifically for finding mates. Each firefly species has a distinctive flash pattern, a specific sequence of lights with particular timing and duration. Males fly around flashing their species-specific pattern, while females perch on vegetation and watch. When a female sees a male of her species producing the correct pattern, she responds with her own flash pattern. The male sees her response, flies toward her, and they exchange more flashes as he approaches, eventually meeting for mating. This system of species-specific flash patterns functions as a form of reproductive isolation, preventing mating between different species. There are over 2,000 species of fireflies, and many of them live in overlapping habitats. The flash patterns allow individuals to identify appropriate mates, even when multiple species are flashing simultaneously in the same area. But the firefly communication system has a dark side. Females of some Photurus firefly species have learned to mimic the flash patterns of females from other genera. When a male of the other species approaches, expecting to mate, the Photurus female captures and eats him. This is aggressive mimicry, using the victim's own communication system against them, a form of bioluminescent trickery. The timing of firefly flashes is precisely controlled and can be remarkably synchronized. In Southeast Asia, certain species of fireflies gather in trees by the thousands and flash in perfect synchrony, creating a spectacle that has amazed observers for centuries. The entire tree appears to pulse with light, with thousands of individuals coordinating their flashes to within milliseconds of each other. This synchronization appears to be achieved through each firefly adjusting its flash timing based on the flashes of its neighbors, a form of distributed coordination with no central controller. In the ocean, bioluminescence serves many functions, with communication being just one. Many deep-sea fish use bioluminescence for counterillumination camouflage, producing light on their undersides that matches the dim downwelling light from above, making them invisible to predators looking up from below. Others use bioluminescence as lures, producing light to attract prey close enough to capture. But some species use bioluminescence specifically for communication with their own kind. Certain species of deep-sea squid use bioluminescent displays for courtship and aggression. They can control the pattern and intensity of light produced by photophores, specialized light-producing organs distributed across their bodies. During encounters with other squid, they produce elaborate light shows that communicate their intent. A male squid might produce one pattern when courting a female and a completely different pattern when confronting a rival male. The hatchetfish, which lives at depths where some sunlight still penetrates, uses its bioluminescence for counterillumination during the day, but appears to use it for signaling at night. Groups of hatchetfish have been observed producing coordinated light displays, though the exact meaning of these displays is still being studied. The ability to turn lights on and off rapidly allows for complex temporal patterns that could encode significant information. One particularly fascinating example of bioluminescent communication involves the Hawaiian bobtail squid and its symbiotic bacteria. The squid has a light organ that houses colonies of Vibrio fischeri bacteria, which produce bioluminescence. The squid regulates its relationship with the bacteria through chemical signals, controlling bacterial population density and light production. At night, the squid uses the bacterial bioluminescence for counterillumination camouflage. This is both a form of communication between species, squid and bacteria, and a system that allows the squid to avoid detection by predators, a reminder that communication systems often serve multiple functions. Dinoflagellates, tiny single-celled plankton, create some of the ocean's most spectacular bioluminescent displays. When disturbed by waves or swimming fish, they emit flashes of blue-green light. This bioluminescence appears to be a defense mechanism, potentially startling small predators, or attracting the attention of larger predators that might eat the organism threatening the dinoflagellate. The result is the phenomenon known as sea sparkle or milky seas, where breaking waves glow with ethereal blue light, and swimming creates trails of luminescence. While not communication between individuals of the same species, this bioluminescence does convey information. A fish swimming through dinoflagellatrich waters leaves a glowing trail that reveals its location to predators. The dinoflagellates are essentially using bioluminescence to call for help, attracting predators to their predators. On land, bioluminescence is less common, but no less fascinating. In New Zealand and Australia, glowworms, which are actually the larvae of fungus gnats, produce bioluminescent silk threads that hang from cave ceilings. Small flying insects attracted to the light become entangled in the sticky threads and are consumed by the glowworm larvae. This is bioluminescence used not for communication, but as a hunting tool, though one could argue it's a form of interspecies communication, albeit a dishonest one. Some fungi produce bioluminescence, creating glowing mushrooms and glowing patches on decaying wood. The function of fungal bioluminescence remains debated. Some researchers suggest it attracts insects that help disperse spores. Others propose it might deter animals that would eat the fungus. It might serve no adaptive function at all, but simply be a byproduct of other metabolic processes. The mystery of why fungi glow reminds us that not every trait necessarily has a clear purpose. The evolution of bioluminescence appears to have occurred independently many times across the tree of life. This convergent evolution suggests that the ability to produce light offers significant advantages in certain environments, particularly in the darkness of the deep ocean, where other forms of communication and signaling are limited. From a physics perspective, light is an excellent communication medium in many ways. It travels quickly, can be modulated in complex patterns, and can be directed with precision. But it also has limitations. Light doesn't travel well in murky water or through vegetation. It can attract unwanted attention from predators. And producing light requires energy, making it more expensive than some other communication methods. The diversity of bioluminescent systems, from fireflies flashing in meadows to deep-sea fish communicating with light organs, demonstrates nature's creativity in adapting a basic chemical reaction to countless different purposes. Each species has shaped its bioluminescence to its specific needs, creating light shows that range from subtle single flashes to elaborate displays that would rival any human-made light art. As darkness falls around you tonight, remember that across the planet, millions of organisms are beginning their nightly conversations in light. Fireflies are flashing their courtship codes. Deep-sea creatures are producing light shows in the ocean's darkness. Dinoflagellates are preparing to sparkle in any wave that disturbs them. The world is having conversations in light, speaking a language that we can see but barely understand, a reminder that communication isn't always about sound or scent, but sometimes about the simple, ancient magic of creating light in the darkness. There's an entire dimension of reality that you're completely blind to, a field of electromagnetic energy that permeates everything. Right now, your body is producing a weak electromagnetic field generated by the electrical activity of your neurons and the beating of your heart. You can't sense it, but some animals can. For them, the electromagnetic world is as real and perceptible as light and sound are for us. Let's begin with the most famous electromagnetic sensors, sharks. The ocean is an electrically conductive medium, and every living thing in it produces weak electric fields through muscular and neural activity. Sharks have evolved the ability to detect these fields through specialized organs called ampullae of Lorenzini, named after the Italian scientist who first described them in 1678. These are small pores visible on a shark's snout, filled with a conductive gel and connected to sensory cells that can detect incredibly weak electrical signals. Just how weak? Sharks can detect electrical fields as faint as 5 billionths of a volt per centimeter. To put that in perspective, If you placed a AA battery in the ocean between two electrodes 1 kilometer apart, a shark could theoretically detect the field it produces. This extraordinary sensitivity allows sharks to do something that seems almost supernatural. They can sense the bioelectric fields of hidden prey. A stingray buried in sand on the ocean floor is invisible to sight, but its breathing and heartbeat generate electrical signals that a shark can detect. The shark essentially sees with electricity, mapping the location of hidden animals through their involuntary electrical emissions. Sharks appear to use electroreception for more than just hunting. They may use it for navigation, detecting the magnetic field of the Earth by sensing the electric currents that field generates as they swim through it. Some species appear to use electroreception in social interactions, though the details of this remain poorly understood. When two sharks encounter each other, they might be exchanging information through their electric fields, a conversation in a sensory modality we can barely imagine. The platypus, one of nature's most peculiar mammals, is also an electroreceptor. The platypus hunts in murky streams where visibility is poor, probing the mud with its sensitive bill, searching for invertebrate prey. That bill contains around 40,000 electroreceptors that can detect the minute electrical fields generated by contracting muscles of hidden prey. When a platypus closes its eyes and ears while diving, which it does regularly, it relies entirely on electroreception and touch to find food. The electroreceptors in a platypus bill are arranged in stripes along the surface, with mechanoreceptors, which detect touch and pressure, interspersed between them. This allows the platypus to simultaneously detect the electrical field of prey and its physical presence, creating a combined sensory map of its underwater environment. The integration of these two senses in the platypus brain allows for remarkably precise localization of prey in three-dimensional space. But the most sophisticated users of electromagnetic fields for communication are electric fish, particularly two groups: the weakly electric fish of South America and Africa. These fish generate their own electric fields and sense distortions in those fields, essentially using electricity for both communication and electrolocation. Electric fish have specialized organs called electric organs, made up of modified muscle or nerve tissue that can generate electrical discharges. In weakly electric fish, these discharges are too weak to stun prey or predators, unlike electric eels or electric rays which produce strong shocks. Instead, they generate continuous or rhythmic electric fields around the fish's body. The fish then monitors its own electric field using electroreceptors distributed over its skin. When an object enters the field, it distorts the pattern of the field, and the fish detects this distortion. Objects with different electrical properties, conductive vs resistive, create different patterns of distortion, allowing the fish to identify what's nearby. This is active electrolocation, similar in concept to echolocation, but using electromagnetic rather than acoustic energy. The remarkable part is how electric fish use this system for communication. Each individual produces an electric field with a specific frequency and pattern, essentially an electrical signature. When two electric fish are near each other, they can detect each other's electric fields and modify their own signals in response. This creates a form of electrical conversation. Some species show jamming avoidance responses. If two fish are producing electric fields at very similar frequencies, the resulting interference makes it difficult for either fish to use their electrolocation effectively. When this happens, the fish automatically shift their frequencies away from each other, reducing interference. This happens so quickly and automatically that researchers initially thought it might be a simple reflex, but it actually involves neural computation in the fish's brain, analyzing the neighboring fish's signal and adjusting its own accordingly. Electric fish also modulate their signals for social communication. During courtship, males often increase the rate or change the pattern of their electrical discharges. Aggressive encounters involve different patterns. Some species even produce specific electrical chirps during social interactions, rapid modulations of the electric field that convey information about the sender's identity, size, and motivational state. The evolution of bioelectricity is ancient. All animals with nervous systems produce electrical signals as part of neural function. Some fish simply evolved the ability to amplify and externalize these signals, turning internal electrical activity into communication and sensing systems. The independent evolution of strong electric organs in multiple fish lineages, electric eels, electric rays, electric catfish, and weak electric organs in others demonstrates that once the basic cellular machinery for producing electricity existed, natural selection found multiple ways to exploit it. Beyond active electroreception, many animals use passive electroreception, sensing the electrical fields produced by other animals without generating fields themselves. This is what sharks and platypuses do. The distinction matters because active electroreception allows much more sophisticated behaviors, including actual communication through electrical signals, while passive electroreception is primarily for hunting and navigation. Some animals may use Earth's magnetic field not just for navigation, but potentially for communication. Magnetite, a magnetic mineral, has been found in the bodies of many animals including birds, fish, sea turtles, and even humans. While its function in most cases relates to navigation and orientation, there's speculation that some animals might use magnetic field detection to coordinate behaviors with others of their species. Honeybees, for instance, produce weak magnetic fields during their waggle dance, and there's evidence that other bees can detect these fields. The exact role of magnetic field detection in bee communication remains under investigation, but it appears to be one of multiple sensory channels through which information is transmitted during the dance. Birds may use magnetic fields to synchronize their behavior during migration. When large flocks of birds migrate, they maintain cohesion and coordination over vast distances. While visual and vocal cues are clearly important, some researchers have suggested that detection of each other's bioelectric or biomagnetic fields might play a role, though this remains speculative. The human body generates various electromagnetic fields. Your heart produces an electrical signal that can be detected by an electrocardiogram. Your brain produces patterns of electrical activity that can be measured by an electroencephalogram. But we've lost, or perhaps never had, the ability to consciously sense these fields. We're surrounded by electromagnetic information that we're completely blind to, living in a sensory world that's missing a dimension that other animals perceive and use for communication. Some people claim to be able to sense electromagnetic fields, a condition sometimes called electromagnetic hypersensitivity. While the symptoms people report are real, controlled studies have consistently failed to show that people can actually detect electromagnetic fields at the levels typically encountered in daily life. What seems to be happening is that people attribute various symptoms to electromagnetic fields when those symptoms actually have other causes. Our nervous systems simply aren't wired to consciously detect the kind of electromagnetic fields that electric fish and sharks sense so clearly. This electromagnetic dimension of animal communication reminds us of a humbling fact. The world we perceive is not the world as it actually is, but rather a narrow slice of reality filtered through our particular sensory organs. Electric fish live in a world of electrical textures and electrical conversations. Sharks hunt in a space where every living thing glows with electromagnetic energy. And we, despite our technological sophistication, remain oblivious to this entire channel of information, unable to perceive something that is, quite literally, all around us. Imagine if your emotions were impossible to hide. If anger made your skin flush bright red, if fear turned you pale, if attraction made you glow with iridescent patterns that shifted across your body. For some animals, this isn't imagination, it's reality. Their skin is a living display screen, capable of changing color in seconds or even fractions of a second, communicating their emotional and motivational state to anyone watching. Cephalopods, octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish are the undisputed masters of rapid color change. Their abilities are so sophisticated that they might seem magical if we didn't understand the biology behind them. A cuttlefish can go from sandy brown to brilliant red to white with black stripes in less than a second, creating moving patterns across its body that ripple and pulse with astonishing complexity. The key to this ability lies in specialized cells in the cephalopod's skin called chromatophores. Each chromatophore is essentially a tiny sac of pigment surrounded by muscle fibers. When the muscles contract, they pull the chromatophore open, spreading the pigment across a larger area and making it visible. When the muscles relax, the chromatophore shrinks back to a tiny point, making the pigment essentially invisible. A single square centimeter of cuttlefish skin might contain hundreds of chromatophores containing different colored pigments: reds, yellows, browns, and blacks. But chromatophores are just the beginning. Beneath them lie iridophores, cells containing stacks of reflective plates made of protein. These create iridescent colors, blues, greens, and silvers, by reflecting light rather than absorbing it. The cephalopod can adjust the spacing between the plates in real time, changing which wavelengths of light are reflected and thus changing the color produced. Deeper still are leucophores, which scatter light to produce white colors. The three-layer system of chromatophores, iridophores, and leucophores gives cephalopods the ability to produce virtually any color and pattern imaginable. And they can control this system with incredible precision, activating individual chromatophores or groups of chromatophores in sequence to create moving patterns across their skin. What makes this even more remarkable is the neural control required. Each chromatophore is controlled by nerve fibers from the brain. A cuttlefish might have millions of chromatophores, meaning its brain is directly controlling millions of individual elements to create its color displays. This requires a level of neural processing that's hard to comprehend, essentially running millions of pixels in real time without any central graphics processor. Cephalopods use color change for multiple purposes. Camouflage is the most obvious. An octopus can match the color and texture of the substrate it's sitting on so perfectly that it becomes nearly invisible. But they also use color change for communication, particularly during social interactions. During mating, male cuttlefish produce elaborate displays, pulsing patterns of color waves across their bodies, sometimes showing different patterns on different sides of their body simultaneously. A male might show aggressive male patterns to a rival on one side, while showing female mimicking patterns to a female on the other side, essentially having two different conversations at once. Octopuses display darker colors and rough skin texture when agitated or aggressive, and paler colors with smooth texture when calm or frightened. Some species flash bright colors as warnings, essentially saying, "I'm venomous, leave me alone." The blue-ringed octopus, which possesses venom powerful enough to kill a human, displays brilliant blue rings when threatened, a warning display that should never be ignored. Squid use color change in hunting, creating waves of color that seem to hypnotize prey. Some species flash sudden patterns of light and dark when attacking, possibly confusing or startling their prey in the moment before capture. The mechanisms behind this are still being studied, but the effect is undeniable. Squid are using their color change abilities not just passively for camouflage, but actively as a tool in predation. Chameleons are famous for color change, though they're not as quick as cephalopods and use a different mechanism. Chameleon color change is based on layers of cells containing different pigments and light-reflecting structures. By changing the spacing of nanocrystals in certain cells, they can shift which wavelengths of light are reflected, changing their color. Contrary to popular belief, chameleons don't primarily change color for camouflage. Most species' color changes are relatively limited and wouldn't provide effective camouflage against different backgrounds. Instead, they change color primarily for communication, particularly in social and reproductive contexts. Male chameleons become more brightly colored during territorial disputes and courtship, displaying yellows, oranges, reds, and blues. The intensity and pattern of these colors communicate the male's physical condition and willingness to fight. Two males encountering each other might both display their brightest colors, essentially sizing each other up without physical combat. If one male's display is more impressive, the other might retreat without a fight, with color serving as an honest signal of fighting ability. Female chameleons also use color change to communicate their reproductive status. Receptive females display certain color patterns that inform males they're willing to mate. Gravid pregnant females display different patterns that essentially say, "I'm already pregnant, go away," which causes males to leave them alone. The evolution of rapid color change represents a significant investment of biological resources. The neural structures required to control millions of chromatophores, the metabolic cost of maintaining these systems, and the vulnerability that comes with having such complex structures in the skin all represent trade-offs. The fact that color change has evolved multiple times in different lineages suggests that the benefits, improved camouflage, effective communication, hunting advantages, outweigh these costs. Some fish also use rapid color change for communication. Many reef fish can adjust their colors within seconds, often becoming paler or darker in response to social situations. Damselfish defend territories and will display darker colors when aggressively defending their patch of reef against intruders. Cleaner fish become paler when performing their cleaning services for larger fish, possibly signaling their non-threatening intent. Flatfish like flounders are remarkable color changers, able to match complex backgrounds, including checkerboard patterns, in laboratory experiments. While this is primarily for camouflage, they also use color change in social contexts, with males developing distinctive patterns during breeding season. Even some terrestrial animals use color change for communication, though usually more slowly than cephalopods or chameleons. Some lizards can adjust their colors over hours or days in response to temperature, social status, and reproductive condition. Male fence lizards, for instance, develop bright blue patches on their throats and bellies during breeding season, which they display to females and rivals through push-up displays. The phenomenon of color change reveals something profound about animal communication. It can be involuntary. A cuttlefish may not be able to hide its emotional state any more than you can stop your pupils from dilating when you look at something interesting. The animal's internal state is written directly on its skin, creating an honest signal that can't easily be faked. This honesty is both a feature and a bug from a communication perspective. Honest signals are reliable, making them useful for recipients who need accurate information, but they also reduce the sender's ability to bluff or deceive, which in some situations might be disadvantageous. Evolution has found various solutions to this trade-off, including the ability in some species to override automatic color responses with voluntary control, allowing both honest automatic displays and controlled strategic displays. There's a type of communication that transcends any single sense, that combines movement, timing, and pattern into something that carries precise information despite containing no words, no sounds, no chemical signals. This is the language of dance and movement, where complex messages are encoded in choreographed motion, and where the body itself becomes the medium of communication. The most famous example of dance communication belongs to the honeybee, and what Carl von Frisch discovered about this dance in the 1940s revolutionized our understanding of animal communication. Von Frisch showed that bees don't just randomly wander until they find flowers. They communicate the location of food sources to their nestmates through a sophisticated system of symbolic dance. When a forager bee discovers a rich food source, she returns to the hive and performs what's called the waggle dance on the vertical surface of the honeycomb. The dance consists of a figure-8 pattern. The bee runs forward in a straight line while waggling her abdomen from side to side, then circles back, alternating the direction of the return loop with each repetition. Here's where it gets remarkable. The direction of that straight waggling run, relative to vertical, indicates the direction to the food source relative to the sun's position. If the food is in the direction of the sun, the bee waggling straight up. If the food is 45 degrees to the right of the sun, the bee waggles 45 degrees to the right of vertical. The bees are using gravity as a reference to encode solar angle, essentially translating between sensory modalities and reference frames. The duration of the waggling run encodes the distance to the food. A longer waggling run means a more distant food source, with the relationship being roughly linear up to several kilometers. Bees who observe the dance can extract this information and fly to the correct location, often finding the food source on their first attempt despite never having been there before. But the waggling dance communicates even more than direction and distance. The vigor of the dance indicates the quality of the food source. A bee who's found excellent nectar dances more enthusiastically and for longer periods than a bee who's found mediocre flowers. This allows the colony to allocate its foraging effort effectively, with more bees recruiting to better food sources. During the dance, the dancer also produces sounds and releases pheromones that are detected by the bees following the dance. These additional signals reinforce the information in the dance and provide samples of the flower's scent, helping followers identify the correct flowers when they arrive at the general location indicated by the dance. The waggling dance represents symbolic communication. The movements don't directly resemble what they represent. There's nothing about waggling your abdomen while running up a vertical surface that naturally suggests fly 2 kilometers toward the sun. The bees must learn the arbitrary mapping between dance movements and spatial locations, making this one of the few examples of learned symbolic communication in insects. For very close food sources, within about 50 meters of the hive, bees perform a different dance called the round dance, where they simply circle in alternating directions without the straight waggling run. This indicates food is nearby, search around the hive, without providing the precise directional information of the waggling dance. Birds also use dance as communication, though in very different contexts. Birds of paradise in New Guinea and Australia perform some of nature's most elaborate courtship displays. Males spend hours preparing their display sites, clearing away debris to create clean stages, and then perform complex dances for visiting females. Each species has its own distinctive display. The blue bird of paradise hangs upside down while displaying his iridescent blue plumage and producing bizarre vocalizations. The superb bird of paradise transforms his body into a black oval disc with bright blue breast shield when he dances. Wilson's bird of paradise clears a patch of forest floor to create a stage, then performs an elaborate dance involving raising his ornate tail and wing plumes while pivoting around the perch. These displays are so elaborate and stylized that they seem almost ridiculous to human observers, but to female birds of paradise, they're crucial information. The quality of a male's display, the intensity of colors, the precision of movements, the symmetry of his plumage, all indicate his genetic quality, health, and fitness. Females observe multiple males before choosing whom to mate with, essentially using the dance as a criterion for selection. What's particularly interesting about bird of paradise displays is that they appear to be partly culturally transmitted. Young males spend years watching older males perform, gradually learning the proper dance through observation and practice. There can even be regional variations in display styles within a species, representing local traditions passed from generation to generation. Cranes perform spectacular dance displays that serve both courtship and pair bonding functions. Cranes mate for life, and their elaborate dances, which involve leaping several feet into the air, bowing, running with wings spread, and tossing vegetation, help establish and maintain pair bonds between mates. Both males and females participate in these dances, which can be triggered throughout the year, not just during breeding season. Manakins are small tropical birds whose males perform extraordinarily rapid displays. Male land-staled manakins perform coordinated displays with a partner, the two males alternating positions on a perch in such rapid succession that they appear to be a single bird with 4 wings. This partnership between males is fascinating because they're ultimately competing for the same females, yet they cooperate in the display, with subordinate males helping dominant males attract females in what appears to be an apprenticeship system. Some spiders use vibratory dances on their webs to communicate. Male jumping spiders perform elaborate courtship displays involving waves of their colorful legs, movements of their bodies, and specific patterns of vibration. These displays are species-specific, and females can reject males who don't perform the correct dance, making the dance an important component of reproductive isolation between closely related species. Peacock spiders in Australia have become internet famous for their remarkable courtship displays. Males raise their ornately patterned abdominal flaps, wave their legs in specific patterns, and move their bodies rhythmically while facing the female. The entire display is performed from just a few centimeters away, with the female watching intently. If she's not impressed, she might simply walk away or even attempt to eat the male, making the stakes of the performance quite high. Fish also use dance-like movements for communication. Some species of gobies perform complex displays involving raising and lowering fins, changing body angles, and specific swimming patterns to attract mates or defend territories. Siamese fighting fish, bettas, use elaborate fin displays combined with specific swimming patterns when confronting rivals, essentially dancing out a threat display that usually allows disputes to be resolved without actual combat. Marine iguanas perform head-bobbing displays where the pattern and frequency of head movements conveys information about the individual's identity, sex, and social status. Different populations have distinct head-bobbing patterns, representing what might be called behavioral dialects. Even some mammals use dance-like displays for communication. Hippos perform threat displays involving wide mouth opening, head swinging, and specific body postures. Male antelopes perform jumping displays called pronking or stotting, leaping high into the air with stiff legs, which appears to signal their fitness to both females and predators. The evolution of dance communication likely arose from ritualization of functional movements. A movement that originally served a purely functional purpose, like taking off in flight or striking at a rival, might become exaggerated and stylized over evolutionary time, eventually becoming a signal in its own right. The original function becomes less important than the communicative function. What makes dance communication particularly powerful is its ability to convey complex, multidimensional information simultaneously. A single dance can communicate direction, distance, quality, and intensity all at once. It can be modulated in real time based on audience response. And it can be culturally transmitted and modified, allowing for regional variation and innovation. The bee waggle dance is particularly remarkable because it represents true symbolic communication in an invertebrate. The relationship between the dance and what it represents is arbitrary and must be learned. This puts bee communication in a category previously thought to be limited to humans and perhaps a few other primates. Close your eyes and imagine you could see heat. Not just feel warmth, but actually see it as distinct colors or shapes, detecting temperature differences of a fraction of a degree from several feet away. You could navigate in complete darkness by sensing the residual warmth of footprints on the floor. You could detect prey hiding behind barriers by sensing their body heat. You could find blood vessels beneath skin by seeing their thermal signature. This seems like science fiction, but for certain animals, this is simply how they perceive the world. Pit vipers, including rattlesnakes, copperheads, and bushmasters, possess one of nature's most sophisticated thermal imaging systems. Between their eyes and nostrils, they have specialized organs called pit organs, hence their name, which are essentially infrared detectors capable of sensing temperature differences as small as 0.003 degrees Celsius. The pit organ is a remarkable piece of biological engineering. It consists of a thin membrane suspended in a cavity, with one side exposed to the environment and the other side insulated. The membrane contains thousands of nerve endings that respond to changes in temperature. When infrared radiation from a warm object strikes the membrane, it causes a tiny temperature increase, which the nerve endings detect almost instantaneously. What's particularly impressive is that pit vipers have a pit organ on each side of their head, giving them binocular thermal vision. Just as having two eyes allows you to perceive depth through binocular vision, having two pit organs allows these snakes to precisely locate heat sources in three-dimensional space. They can strike accurately at warm-blooded prey in complete darkness, guided entirely by thermal imaging. The resolution of pit viper thermal vision is surprisingly good. They can distinguish between objects of different temperatures that are separated by less than an inch at a distance of several feet. This allows them to identify and accurately strike small warm-blooded prey like mice, even in total darkness. The system is so effective that pit vipers actually hunt more successfully at night than during the day, when their thermal vision gives them an advantage over prey that rely more heavily on visual senses. The neural processing of thermal information happens in specialized regions of the pit viper's brain. The thermal information is integrated with visual and other sensory information to create a multimodal perception of the environment. This integration appears to happen in brain regions similar to those that process visual information in other animals, suggesting that the snake's brain treats infrared as another form of vision, rather than as a completely separate sense. Pythons and boas, which are not closely related to pit vipers, have independently evolved thermal sensing organs. Their pit organs are located along their lips and are slightly less sensitive than those of pit vipers, but they serve the same function. This convergent evolution in distantly related snake lineages demonstrates the significant advantage that thermal sensing provides to predatory snakes. Vampire bats are the only mammals that hunt using thermal sensing. These small bats feed on blood from sleeping animals, and they use thermal sensors around their noses to locate blood vessels beneath their prey's skin. The thermal sensors can detect areas where blood vessels are close to the surface, guiding the bat to the optimal location for its bite. The vampire bat's thermal sensors are not as sophisticated as snake pit organs, but they're effective enough for their purpose. Once a bat has landed on a sleeping animal, it uses thermal sensing to find a spot where blood flow is strong and vessels are accessible, then makes a small incision with its razor-sharp teeth. The entire process is so delicate that prey animals often don't wake up during feeding. Some beetles in the genus Melanophila have evolved thermal sensors for a completely different purpose. These beetles are known as fire beetles because they're attracted to forest fires. They can detect infrared radiation from fires from distances of up to 80 kilometers using thermal sensors on their bodies. They fly toward fires because burned forests provide ideal conditions for their larvae, which develop in recently burned wood. The fire beetle's thermal sensors are mechanically quite different from snake pit organs. They contain tiny spheres of liquid that expand when heated, triggering mechanical sensors. It's a completely different solution to the problem of detecting infrared radiation, evolved independently in insects. Some fish appear to have limited thermal sensing abilities, detecting temperature gradients in the water that might indicate the presence of prey, predators, or suitable habitat. However, these abilities are less well understood than thermal sensing in snakes and vampire bats, and they may represent different mechanisms for temperature detection rather than true thermal imaging. The question of whether thermal sensing should be considered a form of communication is interesting. Certainly, it's primarily a sensory system for detecting prey, avoiding predators, and navigating the environment. But prey animals do sometimes engage in behaviors that reduce their thermal signature, like huddling together or seeking shelter that masks their body heat. This could be viewed as a form of communication, albeit an antagonistic one, essentially trying to avoid sending signals that predators might detect. Some researchers have speculated that certain animals might use thermal signatures for intraspecific communication, recognizing individuals by their unique thermal patterns, or detecting emotional states through changes in blood flow that affect surface temperature. However, these possibilities remain largely unexplored, and there's little direct evidence for thermal communication between individuals of the same species. The evolution of thermal sensing required the development of specialized receptors that respond to infrared radiation. All animals produce body heat, so the raw information is always available in the environment. The challenge is detecting it. Pit vipers and other thermal sensing animals evolved nerve cells that are extraordinarily sensitive to temperature changes, then packaged these in structures that focus and amplify the thermal signals. From a physics perspective, thermal radiation is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, just like visible light, only at longer wavelengths. We're all constantly emitting infrared radiation based on our body temperature. Animals with thermal sensors are essentially seeing in a part of the electromagnetic spectrum that's invisible to us. Just as some insects can see in ultraviolet wavelengths we can't detect. Human technology has developed artificial thermal imaging systems, infrared cameras that detect heat signatures. These are used for everything from medical diagnostics to building inspections to military applications. We've essentially built devices that give us the same ability that pit vipers possess naturally, demonstrating yet again how evolution solved problems millions of years before human engineers even recognized the problems existed. One of the most remarkable aspects of thermal sensing is how it changes the animal's perception of day and night. For most animals, nighttime means reduced visibility and greater reliance on non-visual senses. But for pit vipers, darkness is almost irrelevant. Their thermal imaging works just as well in darkness as in light, perhaps even better since there's no visual information to create conflict with thermal information. The night forest that seems empty and featureless to us is, to a pit viper, illuminated with thermal signatures, with every warm-blooded animal glowing against the cooler background. Imagine walking through your house right now, but perceiving it thermally. The places where you sat would glow with residual warmth. Electronic devices would shine with the heat of their components. Cold spots where air conditioning vents blow would appear as dark patches. Other people would appear as bright figures, their core body heat visible even through clothing. It would be a completely different way of experiencing the same physical space, highlighting information that's always present but normally invisible to you. This is the world that pit vipers and vampire bats inhabit, where heat tells stories that are invisible to most other animals, where warmth is as visible as light, and where the thermal signature of life stands out against the cooler background of the inanimate world. It's a reminder that reality is not a single thing, but rather depends on which slice of physical information your sensors can detect and your brain can process. We live in the same world as pit vipers, but we experience completely different versions of it, each shaped by the particular sensor's evolution has provided us. Some animals don't just use their bodies to communicate. They modify the environment itself, creating structures that convey information long after the builder has left. These architectural creations serve as communication in physical form, messages written in sticks, stones, leaves, and earth that tell elaborate stories to anyone who knows how to read them. Male bowerbirds of Australia and New Guinea are perhaps nature's most obsessive architects. They don't build nests for raising young, those are constructed elsewhere by females. Instead, males build elaborate structures called bowers purely for courtship display. These aren't simple affairs. A male satin bowerbird might spend months constructing and decorating an avenue-style bower, 2 parallel walls of sticks creating a corridor that he'll decorate with blue objects, blue flowers, blue feathers, blue berries, and if available, blue plastic items from human settlements. The construction is precise. The walls must be the right height and spacing. The bower must be oriented properly, usually north-south, to control lighting during displays. The decorations must be arranged according to exacting standards, often with smaller items placed in front and larger ones behind, creating a forced perspective that makes the bower appear larger to a female viewing it from the correct angle. But the bowerbird's architectural communication doesn't stop at construction. The bower itself is the message. Its quality indicates the male's age, experience, and genetic quality. Building an excellent bower requires skill developed over years. Young males often build sloppy, poorly decorated bowers. Older, experienced males build masterpieces. Different bowerbird species build different styles of bowers, from the avenue-style bowers of satin bowerbirds to the elaborate maypole bowers of golden bowerbirds, which consist of towers built around saplings and decorated with lichens, orchids, and other materials. Some species build bowers that are architectural marvels, with multiple chambers, thatch roofs, and painted walls. The painting deserves special mention. Several bowerbird species make paint from crushed berries, charcoal, or other materials mixed with saliva, then use a tool, often a piece of bark or a leaf, to apply this paint to the bower walls. This represents one of the few examples of tool use for aesthetic purposes in non-human animals. The male is literally painting his bower to make it more attractive to females. Females visit multiple bowers before choosing a mate, and males are in constant competition. Males will destroy rivals' bowers when given the opportunity, stealing decorations or knocking down carefully constructed walls. This creates an arms race where males must not only build impressive bowers, but also defend them from vandalism by competitors. The bower communicates information on multiple timescales. Its existence advertises that a male is present in the territory. Its quality indicates his skill and dedication. Its specific decorative choices might even indicate his individual identity, as some males show consistent preferences for certain types of decorations. And the displays that males perform at their bowers add another layer of information, with the bower serving as the stage for vocal and visual performances. Termite mounds represent a completely different type of architectural communication. These structures can be enormous, reaching heights of over 20 feet and housing millions of termites. The mound isn't just shelter. It's a sophisticated climate control system with passive ventilation that maintains nearly constant temperature and humidity despite external conditions that vary dramatically. The architecture of a termite mound encodes information about the colony. The size indicates colony age and success. The condition indicates whether the colony is thriving or struggling. Other termites can potentially assess these factors before deciding whether to invade or avoid the colony. But termite mounds also communicate to other species. Various animals, from reptiles to mammals to other insects, recognize termite mounds as reliable sources of food, shelter, or construction material. The mound's presence broadcasts resources here to the broader ecosystem. Prairie dogs construct elaborate burrow systems that are, in a sense, architectural communication. Their tunnels include designated chambers for different purposes: sleeping chambers, nursery chambers, listening chambers near entrances, and even latrine chambers. The structure of these burrow systems is recognized by other prairie dogs, who can enter an unfamiliar burrow and navigate it based on architectural conventions shared across populations. The burrow entrances themselves communicate information. Prairie dogs build distinctive mounds around entrances, and the size and condition of these mounds may convey information about the burrow system below and the prairie dogs that occupy it. Beaver dams and lodges are among the most dramatic examples of animals modifying their environment in ways that communicate to others. A beaver dam advertises the presence of the beaver family and their claim to the water resources in that area. The size and condition of the dam and lodge indicate the family's size, success, and investment in the territory. But beaver architecture communicates beyond just other beavers. The pond created by the dam becomes habitat for numerous other species. The beavers have, through their engineering, sent a message to the ecosystem: new aquatic habitat available here. Fish, amphibians, waterfowl, and countless other species respond to this message, colonizing the new habitat the beavers have created. Spider webs are structures that serve primarily for catching prey, but they also communicate. The presence of a web indicates an active spider in the area. The web's condition tells a story. A pristine web suggests a well-fed spider who repairs regularly, while a damaged web might indicate a struggling individual or recent prey capture. Some spiders leave stabilimenta, decorative silk structures, in their webs, the function of which remains debated, but which might serve as visual signals to prey, predators, or other spiders. Some spider webs even appear to be designed for acoustic communication. The male orb-weaver spider plucks the strands of a female's web in specific patterns, essentially playing the web like a musical instrument to signal his identity and courtship intention. The female can determine the male's species and condition partly through these web vibrations. Caddisfly larvae build protective cases from silk and various materials like sand grains, small pebbles, or plant fragments. Each species has a characteristic case design, and these cases essentially broadcast the species' identity of the inhabitant. While primarily for protection, the cases also serve as recognition signals for potential mates and competitors. Some fish build nests that serve communicative functions. Male sticklebacks build nests from plant material glued together with a special protein from their kidneys, then court females by performing a zigzag dance that leads them to the nest. The nest itself is part of the courtship signal. Females assess nest quality when deciding whether to mate with a male. A well-constructed nest indicates male quality and provides a safe place for eggs. Cichlid fish in Lake Malawi build elaborate sand castles during breeding season. Males excavate large circular pits in the sandy lake bottom, creating distinctive patterns that are visible from above. Females visit these structures to assess males and potentially spawn. The effort required to build and maintain these structures in currents and wave action represents a significant investment that signals male quality. The evolution of architectural communication likely began with structures built for functional purposes that subsequently acquired secondary communicative functions. A termite mound built for climate control also advertises colony presence. A beaver dam built to create stable water levels also signals territory ownership. Over time, natural selection refined these structures to serve both functions effectively. What's particularly interesting about architectural communication is its persistence. A vocalization disappears seconds after production. A scent mark might last days, but a structure can persist for weeks, months, years, or even longer. The oldest termite mounds in Australia are estimated to be over 4,000 years old, containing colonies that have been continuously active for millennia. These structures are messages that outlast their creators, continuing to communicate long after the original architect has died. Architecture as communication also demonstrates the extended phenotype concept, that an organism's influence extends beyond its body to include effects on the environment. The bower, the dam, the burrow, the web, all are extensions of the animal's communicative phenotype, ways that genes express themselves through environmental modification. As humans, we're also architectural communicators, perhaps the most elaborate ones on Earth. Our buildings communicate wealth, power, cultural identity, and individual taste. A house's size and style broadcast information about its owner. Public buildings make statements about civic priorities and values. Even minor architectural choices, a welcome mat, the color of a door, the presence of a fence, communicate to visitors and neighbors. We're not so different from bowerbirds or beavers, modifying our environment to send messages, investing enormous time and resources in structures that serve partly functional and partly communicative purposes. The difference is mainly in scale and complexity, not in the fundamental principle that architecture can be communication, that what we build tells stories about who we are and what we value. Stand in an Australian rainforest and you might hear the sound of a camera shutter, a car alarm, a crying baby, or a chainsaw. None of these sounds belong in the forest, yet they're not recordings or human intrusions. They're all produced by a single bird, the superb lyrebird, one of nature's most accomplished vocal mimics. This ability to copy and reproduce sounds from the environment represents a fascinating category of animal communication: vocal learning and mimicry. Most animals are born with their species' vocalizations pre-programmed. A chicken raised in complete isolation will still produce chicken-typical calls when it matures. But some animals must learn their vocalizations by listening to others and practicing. This capacity for vocal learning is rare. It's only confirmed in humans. Some birds, including parrots, hummingbirds, and songbirds, bats, elephants, seals, and cetaceans. Most mammals, including non-human primates, appear to lack this ability. Lyrebirds are among the most extreme vocal learners and mimics. A male lyrebird's song is a complex medley that can last 20 minutes or more, incorporating fragments copied from every sound source in his environment. This includes the calls of other bird species, the sounds of mammals, environmental sounds like waterfalls or wind, and increasingly, human-generated sounds from nearby settlements. The precision of lyrebird mimicry is extraordinary. When researchers first recorded lyrebirds imitating chainsaws and camera shutters, some people suspected the recordings were fake because the mimicry was too perfect. But it's real. The lyrebird's syrinx, the avian vocal organ, is highly complex, with muscles that can control sound production with remarkable precision. But why would a lyrebird mimic other species' calls and human sounds? The answer appears to be related to sexual selection. Females choose mates partly based on the complexity and quality of their songs. A male who can accurately reproduce a wide variety of sounds demonstrates neural and physical abilities that might indicate overall fitness. The song becomes an honest signal of cognitive ability and motor control. Parrots represent another extreme of vocal learning and mimicry. While lyrebirds mainly incorporate mimicked sounds into songs used for mate attraction, parrots use vocal learning for social communication. Wild parrots learn group-specific and even individual-specific vocalizations that serve as identifiers, essentially like dialects and names. In captivity, parrots can learn human words and sometimes appear to use them contextually. The African gray parrot Alex, studied by researcher Irene Pepperberg, demonstrated the ability to use human words to label objects, colors, shapes, and quantities, and to answer questions about them. While debates continue about the exact nature of Alex's linguistic abilities, there's no question that he was using learned vocalizations in contextually appropriate ways. Other parrot species show similar abilities. Some can learn dozens or even hundreds of words and phrases, reproducing not just the sounds, but often the intonation and emotional tone of the original speaker. A parrot might learn its owner's phone ringing and reproduce it so accurately that the owner answers the non-existent call. Mockingbirds and thrashers are noted for their mimicry, incorporating elements from dozens of other species' songs into their own vocalizations. Northern mockingbirds can learn over 200 different song types, many of them copies of other birds' songs. Males sing these varied songs when defending territories and attracting mates, with repertoire size apparently influencing female choice. What's particularly interesting about mockingbird mimicry is that they don't simply copy individual sounds, they recombine elements creatively. A mockingbird might take the beginning of one species' song, combine it with the middle of another's, and add the ending from a third, creating novel sequences that are recognizably mimicry, but aren't direct copies of anything in nature. Starlings are also accomplished mimics. European starlings can learn calls from other species and environmental sounds, incorporating them into their complex songs. Some starlings have been documented imitating human speech, door buzzers, telephones, and other human-generated sounds with remarkable accuracy. Corvids such as crows, ravens, jays show varying degrees of vocal learning and mimicry. Common ravens can learn to imitate various sounds, including human words. There are numerous reports of captive ravens learning to say words and phrases, sometimes using them in contextually appropriate situations. In the wild, ravens appear to have some degree of geographic variation in their calls, suggesting cultural transmission of vocalizations. Among mammals, cetaceans, such as whales and dolphins, are notable vocal learners. Each bottlenose dolphin develops a unique signature whistle early in life, essentially giving itself a name. These whistles are learned, not innate, and dolphins can learn to produce the signature whistles of other dolphins, essentially calling them by name. Orcas have dialects. Different pods have distinct call repertoires that are learned and passed down through generations. These dialects are stable enough that researchers can identify which pod an orca belongs to by analyzing its vocalizations. Orcas can also learn new calls, and there are documented cases of orcas in captivity learning to imitate human speech sounds, though not with the clarity of parrots. Humpback whales produce elaborate songs that change over time within populations. All males in a population sing roughly the same song, but the song evolves gradually, with new phrases added and old ones dropped. This cultural evolution of song represents a form of cumulative cultural change rarely seen outside humans. Strikingly, new song elements can spread across populations, with songs from one group of humpbacks being learned by groups thousands of miles away. Bats are the only known group of land mammals, besides cetaceans, with confirmed vocal learning abilities. Some species show evidence of learning their social calls, and there's geographic variation in call structure that suggests cultural transmission. Mother bats and their pups engage in vocal exchanges that appear to be learning opportunities, with pups gradually developing their calls through practice and feedback. Elephants show evidence of vocal learning, with different family groups having distinctive contact calls. Elephants can apparently recognize the calls of specific other individuals and groups, suggesting a learned component to their vocal communication. There are also reports of elephants imitating sounds from their environment, including one documented case of an elephant learning to imitate words in Korean and another learning to produce truck engine sounds. Seals and sea lions can learn new vocalizations. Harbor seals in different regions have distinct vocal repertoires, and studies have shown they can learn new call types through social exposure. Some captive seals have been trained to mimic human speech sounds with surprising accuracy, demonstrating their capacity for vocal learning even though they don't naturally use it for such complex imitation. The neural basis of vocal learning involves specialized brain circuits that connect auditory processing regions with motor control regions for the vocal apparatus. Only animals with these specialized circuits can learn vocalizations. The circuit appears to have evolved independently several times, representing convergent evolution of similar neural solutions to the challenge of vocal learning. Why is vocal learning so rare? It requires significant neural infrastructure to coordinate the hearing of sounds, the memorization of their patterns, the motor learning needed to reproduce them, and the feedback loops to refine production. Most animals get by perfectly well with innate vocalizations, so the benefits of vocal learning must be substantial to justify the costs. The benefits seem to relate to social complexity and cognitive abilities. Vocal learning allows for cultural transmission of information, for individual recognition, for creation of group-specific dialects that reinforce social bonds, and potentially for more flexible and complex communication systems. Species with vocal learning tend to be long-lived, socially complex, and cognitively sophisticated. Vocal mimicry specifically, copying sounds from other species or environments, might serve several functions. It could be honest signaling, demonstrating cognitive and motor abilities to potential mates. It might provide camouflage, allowing an animal to blend into the acoustic environment or confuse predators and competitors. It might facilitate deception, as in the aggressive mimicry of Photuris fireflies that mimic other species' signals, or some birds that mimic predator calls to scare competitors away from food. The relationship between vocal learning and language has fascinated researchers. Humans are extreme vocal learners, capable of learning any language we're exposed to as children. Our vocal learning ability is necessary, but not sufficient for language. We also have unique syntactic and semantic abilities. But studying vocal learning in other species helps us understand the evolutionary building blocks that made human language possible. As you listen to this now, you're using abilities that most mammals don't possess. Every word you understand is a learned sound pattern, acquired through years of exposure and practice. The fact that you can say elephant or mockingbird relies on the same vocal learning capacities that allow parrots to talk, dolphins to call each other by name, and lyrebirds to imitate chainsaws. We're part of a small club of vocal learners, species that don't just use their voices instinctively, but learn how to use them, borrowing sounds from the world around us and repurposing them for communication, creating in the process something remarkably like language, or at least laying the foundation on which language could be built. Tonight, we've traveled through a zoo of communication methods that most of us barely knew existed. What strikes me most about all these communication systems is how they remind us that our human experience of reality is just one narrow slice of what's actually out there. The bat flying overhead is navigating through an acoustic world we can barely imagine. The elephant rumbling in the savannah is conducting conversations across miles using sounds we can't hear. The octopus flashing colors is having emotional experiences written directly on its skin. The bee dancing in the hive is using its body as a symbolic map. And all around us, constantly, animals are sending and receiving messages in modalities we're completely blind to, conducting the endless conversation of life in all its extraordinary diversity. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the hidden languages of the animal kingdom. If you're already drifting off, then our mission is complete. But if you're still awake, perhaps another deep dive through one of our previous episodes will carry you gently into slumber. Until we meet again in these quiet hours, may you hear the songs that fill the silence, See the signals written in light and color, and remember that the world is far stranger and more wonderful than it appears. Full of voices speaking in languages we're only just learning to understand.